Then the Lord spoke to Job out of the storm. So God is not done now. He's basically silenced Job. He has presented Job with the overwhelming reality that Job is not in control and is not ultimately in position to accuse the one who is in control. But he has more to say. He's made his point already, but he has other things to say here. So then the Lord spoke to Job out of the storm. Brace yourself like a man. I will question you, and you will answer me. Would you discredit my justice? And now he's getting to the heart of the matter. So the first two chapters, 38 and 39, when the first half of God's speech was about establishing, really what it was, God was establishing his credentials to run the world by pointing out Job's inadequacy to do so. He was basically saying, can you do all these? Obviously, the answer to these questions would have all been no. No, Job cannot do these things. Job does not do these things. We cannot do these things. You can ask me those questions, and I have to say, no, God, I cannot do these things. All these things you asked of Job there in chapter 38 and 39, Job has to answer no, and so do I. I can't do these things either. I may know about these things. I may have more 3,600 plus years of more observation of these things than Job had. I may be in a position in some cases to be more accurate in my understanding of some of these things, but I can't control them. Even if that's true, even if I understand these things better than Job did, doesn't mean I can control them. Doesn't mean I have perfect knowledge of them. Certainly doesn't mean that I can do all these things at once. I mean, we're talking about going from building the earth at the beginning of creation to giving orders to the dawn to take its place in the morning, to telling the sun when to come up, to saying the lightning bolts on their way, to where the wind and hail and snow come from, to controlling all the various aspects of creation, the wild animals, the domesticated animals, the stars in the heavens. It's like, certainly I can't do all these things at once. I may be able to specialize in one of these fields, but no one can do all this stuff at once. I had to say no, you have to say no. Job had to say no. I have to say no, you have to say no. Nobody can do all this. Only one being can do all this. And that's the one who's actually asking the question here. So what he's doing here in the first couple of chapters is he's establishing his ability, his credentials to do all this stuff by pointing out our complete lack of ability to do all these things. But he's doing that for the sake of setting up this section here. So now that we've established that God alone can handle all this stuff, here's the real heart of the matter. Would you discredit my justice? Would you condemn me to justify myself? Do you have an arm like God's? Can your voice thunder like his? Then adorn, if you can do that, adorn yourself with glory and splendor, and clothe yourself in honor and majesty. Unleash the fury of your wrath. Look at every proud man and bring him low. Look at every proud man and humble him. Crush the wicked where they stand. Bury them all in the dust together. Shroud their faces in the grave. Then, if you can do that, Job, if you can put on your glory and majesty and splendor and enforce justice on the earth, if you can do that, then I myself will admit to you that your own right hand can save you. Can you do that, Job? Can you do that, listener? I can't do that. I had to admit, I can't do that. You know, like I said before, I have had plenty of complaints about the way God runs the world. I don't think I'm the only one. Okay, there have been times in the past when I have been very much a complainer about the way. I remember one time when I took the pages of one of the Bibles I had at that point in time, and I ripped them out of the spine of the binding, and I used them as toilet paper. Okay, it's like there have been times when I have been very much against the way that God has set up the world. But in the end, it's like I can't do a better job. Like I didn't set this world spinning. I didn't make anything. I'm not in control of anything, and I can't establish justice anymore. I can't do anything about any of this. I am completely inadequate and insufficient to do any of it. I can't even take care of myself, let alone handle all this other stuff. So no, my own right hand cannot save me. And Job has to admit that too. Look at the behemoth. Now, we've already done, okay, so before we get into the rest of this, we're going to talk about Behemoth here. In chapter 41, we're going to talk about Leviathan. Behemoth is a land animal, and Leviathan, as we mentioned earlier in the book, is a sea creature. All right, I do not believe these are real animals. We've already talked about the real animals. We did that in chapter 39. We have moved past that point in the discourse. Chapters 38 and 39 were about God's administration of the world, his creative powers to make the world and set it in place and get it running and keep it running, and his administrative powers to administrate it as it goes. We've already established that. So we've had our discussion about the sun, the moon, the stars, the lightning, the rain, the hail, the wind. We've had our discussion about the lions, the mountain goats, the wild donkeys, the ostriches, the wild ox, the horse, the hawk, the eagle. Okay, we've already talked about that. Now we're talking about something different. We've moved the discussion beyond talking about the natural order and talking about the way God administers justice in his creation. So this behemoth and this Leviathan are not part of the category of us talking about actual animals. Okay? Now you're going to have people out there who will insist that these must be real creatures, because why would God talk about a mythological creature or a made-up monster or something like that? But again, that's not the point here. Like we're losing track of the idea. This is poetry. This is a story that's being told to communicate a point. God has already made his point that he runs creation, and Job does not. He runs the world order, the natural order of the world, and Job does not. So now he's saying, I control these forces of chaos too. These forces of chaos that are so great and so terrible that they cause men to flee in fear. I have no fear of these things. I'm in control of these things too. So that's what the behemoth and the Leviathan stand for. The behemoth would have been a land-based creature, and the Leviathan is a sea monster. And remember, in stories around the world at this time, a lot of the creation accounts at this point in time would have involved God or the gods battling a sea monster and making the world out of the dead sea monster's corpse or something along those lines. Very, 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 very common. And so he's saying, not only did that not, I fight Leviathan, God can fight Leviathan, but you and I cannot fight Leviathan. God made Leviathan. Like, he is not afraid of Leviathan, even though you and I would be running in terror at the sight of him. The Leviathan is not a crocodile, and Behemoth is not a hippopotamus or even a dinosaur. Okay, these are not real animals. These are made-up creatures that mankind was telling stories about back in Job's day. And they stood for just the terrifying forces that are beyond man's ability to understand or control. They are not representative of real animals. We had that discussion already. That was in chapter 39. Okay, we've already had that discussion. This is about something different. These are about the monsters in our minds that we make up. Look at the behemoth, which I made along with you, and which feeds on grass like an ox. What strength he has in his loins! What power in the muscles of his belly! His tail sways like a cedar. The sinews of his thighs are close-knit. His bones are tubes of bronze. His limbs like rods of iron. He ranks first among the works of God. Yet his maker can approach him with the sword. We cannot. You and I cannot. Whatever this creature is, whatever this monster is, you and I dare not approach him with the sword, but God can. The hills bring him their produce, and all the wild animals play nearby. Under the lotus plants he lies, hidden among the reeds in the marsh. The lotuses conceal him in their shadow. The poplars by the stream surround him. When the river rages, he is not alarmed. He is secure. All the Jordan should surge against his mouth. Can anyone capture him by the eyes, or trap him and pierce his nose? Well, the Maker can. It's already said the Maker can approach him with the sword, but you and I can't. You and I need to leave this creature alone. Leave that to God to deal with this creature. Can you pull in Leviathan with a fish hook? Now, this is a water-based animal. Or tie down, again, this is a sea monster. Really what this is a giant sea monster. this creature does not actually exist, but it does exist in the realms of men's minds. Men's minds. Can you pull in Leviathan with a fish hook, or tie down his tongue with a rope? Can you put a cord through his nose, or pierce his jaw with a hook? Will he keep begging you for mercy? Will he speak to you with gentle words? Of course, the answer to all these questions is no. Will he make an agreement with you for you to take him as your slave for life? Spare my life, but make me a slave? No, he's not going to say that to you. You are not. And this is one of the ways that we can know he's not talking about a crocodile here. Because men can hunt crocodiles. Men have hunted crocodiles. Men did hunt crocodiles in this point in time. So we're not talking, you see in the footnotes here, talking about the crocodile. He's not talking about a crocodile. Okay? He's not talking about an animal that we can actually hunt. We can hunt crocodiles. It may be dangerous. It may be deadly. We may not always win. But we can do it. And we have been doing it. Maybe we're doing it even in this day and time. Job could have done it. I watched it to get ready for this lesson. I watched a video of two guys, two nature explorers, I guess, down in the Florida Everglades, literally picking up and grabbing a crocodile and an alligator with their bare hands and holding them in front of the camera and talking about the differences. Okay, it's like this is not talking about a crocodile. These are small crocodiles, okay? These are not huge 8-foot fully grown alligators or crocodiles. Okay, these were smaller ones. But the fact is, they could do that. They could just jump on this, they spotted the creature, they approached it from behind, they reached in and grabbed it and closed its jaws. The alligator's bite or crocodile's bite is extremely dangerous when coming down, extremely forceful coming down. But if you hold it shut, the animal can't do anything. So we're not talking about a crocodile here, okay? We're not talking about an animal that man actually has the ability to fight. This is a creature, as well as Behemoth, that is totally beyond man's control, beyond man's ability to deal with. The only one who can approach these creatures is God. Will he make an agreement with you for you to take him as your slave for life? Can you make a pet of him, like a bird, or put him on a leash for your girls? Will traders barter for him? Now, people have been trading and bartering crocodile skins for a long time. So we know this is not a crocodile because this answer is no. But for the crocodile, the answer is yes. Traders do barter for crocodile goods. Will they divide him up among the merchants? Can you fill his hide with harpoons, or his head with fishing spears? Again, if it's a crocodile, the answer to that question would be yes. But the answer obviously is no, so this is not a crocodile. If you lay a hand on him, you will remember the struggle and never do it again. Any hope of subduing him is false. The mere sight of him is overpowering. No one is fierce enough to rouse him. Who then is able to stand against me? I made the Leviathan, I made the Behemoth. I made, like he did with the ostrich. We talked about the ostrich. He didn't seem to make the ostrich with any sense. He made the ostrich, however we think of the ostrich, whatever we think of the ostrich is the way it is because that's the way God made it. God made the Behemoth. He even said, I made Behemoth along with you. Only his maker can stand to Behemoth. I made Leviathan too. If no one can stand against Leviathan, and I made Leviathan, I'm the one who can stand against Leviathan. If no one can stand against Leviathan, then who can stand against me? Who has a claim against me that I must pay? Everything under heaven belongs to me. I will not fail to speak of his limbs, his strength, and his graceful form. Who can strip off his outer coat? Who would approach him with a bridle? Who dares open the doors of his mouth, ringed about with his fearsome teeth? His back has rows of shields tightly sewn together. Each is so close to the next that no air can pass between. They are joined fast to one another. They cling together and cannot be parted. His snorting throws out flashes of light. His eyes are like the rays of dawn. Firebrands stream from his mouth. Sparks of fire shields. This is a fire-breathing monster. Okay, this is a fire-breathing aquatic monster. There has never been such an animal in the annals of the world's history. Okay, that has never. So this is not a real creature. We're not talking about an actual animal. We're talking about something that man has made up in his mind that God is using here to teach Job a lesson. Like these most fearsome things you can think of, Job. The forces of chaos that threaten this world are still under my control. Way back in the day, according to the other ancient cultures around the time, I fought this monster to make the world. Now, the Genesis doesn't say that. God doesn't say that. But the people of the day thought that. They had this idea of God or the gods fighting a sea monster to make the world. God is directly leaning into this imagery here, saying, I made this creature. You can't fight this creature. Whatever this Leviathan is, whatever this force of chaos is that is so terrifying and deadly that it shoots flames out of its breath, you can't do anything about it, but I can. And if you can't do anything about Leviathan, what can you do about me? His breath sets coals ablaze, and flames dart from his mouth. Strength resides in his neck. Dismay goes before him. The folds of his flesh are tightly joined. They are firm and immovable. His chest is hard as rock, hard as a lower millstone. When he rises up, the mighty are terrified. They retreat before his thrashing. The sword that reaches him has no effect, nor does the spear, or the dart, or the javelin. Iron he treats like straw, and bronze like rotten wood. Arrows do not make him flee. Slingstones are like shaft to him. A club seems to him but a piece of straw. He laughs at the rattling of the lance. So anything you can do, Job, or anybody, anything you can think of, any weapon you can fashion, is not going to be enough against Leviathan. He'll just laugh it all off, and then he'll destroy you. You don't dare rouse Leviathan. You don't dare go up against Leviathan, but God does. His undersides are jagged potsherds, leaving a trail in the mud like a threshing sledge. He makes the depths churn like a boiling cauldron, and stirs up the sea like a pot of ointment. Remember, the sea would have represented the forces of chaos. And this creature stirs up the sea. This creature is very dangerous, very scary. Behind him he leaves a glistening wake. One would think the deep had white hair. Nothing on earth is his equal, a creature without fear. He looks down on all that are haughty. He is king over all that are proud. And if you can't fight Leviathan, what can you do against the being who made Leviathan? The only one who can fight Leviathan. The only one who has a chance against Leviathan. Then Job replied to the Lord. That's it. God is... So the first half of God's discourse was about establishing his credentials over his creation by establishing Job and all of ours inability to control creation. Then he gets to the heart of the matter, saying that if you can't control creation, if you can't do all of this stuff that I do all the time, if you can't send the lightning bolts on their way, if you can't tell the stars where to take their place, if you don't bring out the wind and the rain and the hail and the snow in their season, then how are you going to criticize me for my ability to do this? How are you going to discredit my ability? If I can do these things, you can't do all these things. Where do you come from in terms of accusing me? Like, what do you have to accuse me of? Would you discredit my justice? And he talks about his ability to administer justice in his creation. And then talks about these forces of chaos beyond creation, beyond our ability to control, and saying that I have that under control too. That is not, those things are not a threat to me, even if they're terrifying to you. So then Job replies to the Lord, I know that you can do all things, and no plan of yours can be thwarted. You asked, who is this that obscures my counsel without knowledge? Surely I spoke of things I did not understand, things too wonderful for me to know. You said, listen now, and I will speak. I will question you, and you shall answer me. My ears had heard of you, but now my eyes have seen you. Therefore, I despise myself. So basically, I take back everything I said, and I repent in dust and ashes. Now, he hasn't actually seen God. I'm not sure what the original language, how they would have phrased it, or what metaphors or idioms, what common figures of speech they would have had there. But our way of saying it in English, my ears had heard of you, but now my eyes have seen you, basically mean that the knowledge he had before of God was insufficient to the knowledge he now has. He now has a deeper understanding of and relationship with God than he had before all of this. That's what ultimately he wanted. All the stuff he talked about from the beginning of the book until now, ultimately what he wanted was a deeper insight into God. He wanted to know why God was doing this to him. Actually, he doesn't know that still. God never told him that. Job never did find out what was actually going on, what brought about his bout with suffering. He never did find that out. If he did, it was much later in life, and it's not mentioned here. He doesn't find it out now. God doesn't tell him in this big climactic scene. But he's satisfied now. He still doesn't know the answer to his questions. But now he realizes that he doesn't need to know the answer to his questions. What he needs to know is God. And he has a deeper understanding of God than he had before. And that's ultimately what he wanted from the beginning. After the Lord had said these things to Job, he said to Eliphaz the Temanite, remember those guys? They're still hanging around somewhere. I am angry with you and your two friends, Bildad and Zophar, because you have not spoken to me what is right, as my servant Job has. So God was not angry with Job for whatever it is he said. Job said a lot of things that seems like God could have been angry with him over it. I think, again, as I said earlier, the difference was the intent. Job was speaking what he said for the sake of trying to figure out more about God, and the other three characters were not. They were saying what they said in order to try to put God in a box where they could control him, because they needed to believe that what they were saying was true, so that what happened to Job then would not happen to them. That gave them a measure of control over their lives, because if what they were saying was true, then Job got what was coming to him. Job had some kind of hidden sin that they were trying all along to get him to confess, and that is what he's being punished for. If that's true, if they were right about that, then that meant as long as they didn't do what Job did, then they wouldn't get what Job got. As long as they avoided whatever sin Job fell into, then what the misery that Job was experiencing would not happen to them. And they needed to believe that. That was important. They were really clinging to that, and they got more and more forceful about insisting that Job make a confession of his sin as time went on, because it was important to them for that to be the reason why he was suffering. So they were trying to put God in a box and say that God is only doing this to Job because Job did something to deserve it. So they spoke wrongly of God. They spoke, and I believe ultimately it was that they spoke with wrong intent. Job said things about God that you can say that come very close to being wrong about God. But I think the difference is that Job did not speak it with ill intent. He spoke his things out of a desire legitimately to understand more about God and get closer to him. Whereas the three friends were not doing that. Were not speaking with that motivation. They were speaking with the intent of trying to put God in a little box so that they could control him and that he wouldn't do to them what he did to Job for apparently no reason. So, I am angry with you and your two friends because you have not spoken to me what is right, as my servant Job has. So now take 7 bulls and 7 rams, and go to my servant Job, and sacrifice a burnt offering for yourselves. My servant Job will pray for you, and I will accept his prayer and not deal with you according to your folly. You have not spoken to me what is right, as my servant Job has. So Eliphaz the Temanite, Bildad the Shuhite, and Zophar the Naamathite did what the Lord told them. And the Lord accepted Job's prayer. So obviously Job prayed for them like God said he was going to. Which is probably Job's final test. The text doesn't specifically say that, but praying for his friends and forgiving them for their harsh treatment of him, I believe would have been Job's final test. After Job had prayed for his friends, the Lord made him prosperous again, and gave him twice as much as he had before. All his brothers and sisters, and everyone who had known him before came and ate with him in his house. So he had still family members around. He mentioned that earlier. he talked about his remaining family members in previous chapters. He still had a wife, and he still had siblings, cousins, other relatives. The only relatives of his who died were his 10 children, his 10 offspring. But his other relatives, his other family members, were still alive. They just were shunning him at this time. They comforted him and consoled him over all the trouble the Lord had brought upon him, and each one gave him a piece of silver and a gold ring. The Lord blessed the latter part of Job's life more than the first. He had 14,000 sheep, 6,000 camels, 1,000 yoke of oxen, and 1,000 donkeys. So let's go all the way back here. All the way back to Job 1. It said he had 7,000 sheep, now he's got 14,000. It said he had 3,000 camels, now he has 6,000 camels. It said he had 500 yoke of oxen, now he has 1,000 yoke of oxen. And it said he had 500 donkeys, now he has 1,000 donkeys. So he has twice as much now as he had before. And he also had 7 sons and 3 daughters. Now I don't believe these are the same children born again. I believe these are 10 different people. Those kids are dead. They're the casualties. And the men servants and maid servants. We don't care as much about them, though. They're dead. They're the casualties. They're the actual casualties in this war. They're the ones who lost their lives as part of this wager. But these are new children. I don't know if you could say they were supposed to replace the old ones or not. I don't know. That seems kind of weird. But at any rate, he now has offspring. And remember, again, to their minds, the way you live forever is by having lots of sons. Okay, it's like it's important to them, even with the material blessing, it's important to them to have offspring to carry on the name. That's how they live forever. They can't live forever because their bodies are going to die someday. And these people have not yet been told by God that he's going to resurrect them at some point down the road. They might have a wish for that, but they haven't been told that by him yet. So in their minds, their way of living forever is to carry their name on forever through their sons. And Job's opening lament, way back in chapter 3, was all about how now he has nothing. He might as well have died as an infant, died in the womb, because everything he's done in his life up until now has been meaningless since he has nothing left. He has no legacy, he has no purpose, nothing to leave behind in the world. So now he has these blessings again, now he has more children to carry on his name again. The first daughter he named Jemimah, the second Keziah, and the third Karen Hapuk. Nowhere in all the land were there found women as beautiful as Job's daughters. And their father granted them an inheritance along with their brothers. So we don't have the names of the sons, which is odd. I think this is the only place in Scripture where we get the names of the daughters, but not the names of the sons. Now, I don't know enough about the original language to tell you what significance these names have. Jemimah, Keziah, and Karen Hapuk. I legitimately, that's beyond, I looked it up, I tried to figure it out, but it's beyond my knowledge of expertise to tell you. There probably is a significance to the names. I think the reason why the daughters are highlighted here especially is because of Job's generosity in giving them an inheritance, which was extremely unusual, in fact unheard of. Even in the law, now again, Job was not under the law of Moses, but even in the law of Moses, women didn't get land inheritances unless they had no brothers. We had that case of the Zelophehad's daughters, which are mentioned throughout the book of Numbers. And they got an inheritance in their tribal possession, assuming they married into they married a cousin or something into their tribe. But that's only because they didn't have any brothers. They only received that inheritance because there were no brothers to take it. If they had a brother, the brother would have gotten it all, and they wouldn't have gotten any of that. So I think that Job's daughters are highlighted here. There may be some significance in their original names. That there may be some message there. Maybe, I don't know. I really don't. Legitimately don't know. But I think they're mentioned here to highlight Job's generosity in giving them an inheritance, which would have been way, way, way out of step with what was normal at this point in time. Even by the standards of the law of Moses. That was not common. After this, Job lived 140 years. Now, some people will tell you, will think, we have no idea how old Job was before this. It just says after this, he lived 140 years. If we go with the pattern of everything being doubled, then that stands to reason he was 70 when his first set of woes happened. because then he had a double lifespan later on. But we really have no way of saying that. If that were the case, then he would have ultimately lived 100, 210 years. But we have no way of knowing that. He saw his children and their children to the 4th generation. And so he died, old and full of years. Now, it would seem as though the ending to the book of Job kind of undercuts a large part of the premise of the book of Job, in that God seems to bless Job materially for his righteousness at the end of the book, whereas the entire point of the book of Job was in demonstrating how God doesn't always do that. So the ending in the book of Job would seem to go against that entire point and theme of the book. I think you just have to look at it as though God was generous to Job. I don't think God was rewarding Job for passing the test so much as being generous to him in the second half of his life. Okay, so that's it for the book of Job. Difficult book, a long book, a difficult book, probably the most difficult book, or one of them. One of the most difficult books in the entire Bible. In the original language, we have an English translation, so you don't really get a sense of it, but in the original language, it would have been one of the toughest ones because it was deliberately written to sound archaic and difficult. So it's not an easy book, and it has themes and messages that are not easy to deal with or figure out. So, tough book. I've done what I can with it. It's one of those things where I think you just kind of have to constantly wrestle with it. It doesn't have any easy messages or easy answers. I've done what I can with it. Next, we're going to go back to Judges. Okay, so we're going to go back to the timeline now. We're going to go back to the historical narrative. And we're going to be covering the book of Judges. And then we're going to go into the book of Ruth. And then we're going to get into Samuel. And we're going to be finally going to be talking about the kings. So, that's what we're going to be doing next. Judges, Ruth, 1 Samuel.